Welcome to Monk's Temple. Let us begin by simply arriving. Not just your body, but the part of you that is always moving, always planning, always worrying. The part that carries yesterday like a weight and reaches for tomorrow like something to grab. Let us invite that part to pause. To rest. To simply listen. There is a teaching passed down through 25 centuries, preserved in forests and caves and simple monasteries. It is about something the Buddha called the secret. Not hidden by people, but hidden in plain sight, like the sky we forget to notice. It is about how the mind actually works, not how we think it works. The Buddha observed something remarkable about human psychology. He saw that we have two capacities within us, and they almost never work together. Most of us spend our lives using only one, or using both completely out of sync. And because they never come together, we suffer. We struggle. We feel trapped in patterns we cannot break. The first capacity is discernment. The ability to see clearly, to observe your own thoughts, to recognize when fear arises or when that old story about not being good enough starts playing. Discernment is like a light. It illuminates what is happening in your inner world. The second capacity is stillness. The ability to concentrate, to gather the scattered pieces of your attention into one unified whole. Not through force, but through gentle, unwavering presence. Stillness is like a clear, calm lake. When the water is still, you can see all the way to the bottom. When it is choppy, you see nothing but surface chaos. Here is the secret. These two capacities need each other. They are not separate practices. They are two wings of the same bird. You cannot fly with only one wing, no matter how strong it is. The Buddha said it simply in an ancient collection of verses called the Dhammapada. There is no deep seeing for one who cannot be still. And there is no deep stillness for one who cannot see. But one who has both stillness and deep seeing is on the verge of freedom. On the verge of a peace that does not depend on anything at all. Think about what this means psychologically. Most of us, when we try to understand ourselves, we think our way through problems. We analyze. We reflect. We turn things over and over. This is discernment operating alone, but operating in chaos. The mental lake is choppy. The thoughts are churning. And we wonder why we cannot see clearly, why we keep arriving at the same confusions. Other times, we try to find peace. We try to quiet the mind. But without discernment, this stillness, if it comes at all, is just a temporary escape. It does not transform anything. It does not uproot anything. It is like sweeping dust under the rug and calling the room clean. The Buddha's path is different. It is a dance between these two capacities. A feedback loop. A conversation between the part that sees and the part that can be still. And when these two begin to work together, something shifts. Something opens. You start to see things you never saw before, not because you are trying harder, but because the conditions are finally right for seeing. I want to tell you a story about this. It is from my own life, before I ever encountered these teachings formally. Years ago, I lived near a man who restored antique clocks. His small shop was filled with timepieces from centuries past, each with its own personality, its own rhythm. I would visit him sometimes and just watch him work. He had a magnifying lens fixed to his eye and tools so small they looked like toys. He would open the back of a clock and peer into a world of gears and springs and tiny wheels, all moving in precise coordination. One day I asked him how he knew what was wrong with a clock that wasn't working. He smiled and said something I have never forgotten. He said, "I don't look for what is broken. I look for what is not moving when everything else is moving. The stillness reveals the problem." He explained that in a properly working clock, every gear moves. The motion flows through the entire mechanism. But when something breaks, a gear stops. And that stillness, that unnatural pause in the middle of motion, shows you exactly where to look. The stillness reveals what the motion hides. That is what the Buddha's path does. The ordinary mind is constant motion, constant churning, constant becoming. You cannot see what is broken because everything is moving so fast. But when you learn to be still, really still, the places where you are stuck become visible. The gears that have stopped moving reveal themselves. And then discernment can do its work. This is the beginning of the path. Not trying harder to see. Not trying harder to be still. But learning to let these two capacities support each other, like two hands clasped together, each giving strength to the other. If this exploration of the mind speaks to something in you, if you sense that there is more to your own awareness than you have yet discovered, please take a moment to subscribe to Monk's Temple. It is a simple way to support this work and to ensure we continue walking this path together. Let us go deeper into this dance between stillness and seeing. Between the calm lake and the light that can now penetrate it. Between the clock that has stopped its frantic motion and the watchmaker who can finally see what needs repair. The Buddha gave a name to this quality of stillness. He called it Jhāna. It is a word that means absorption, but not absorption in the way we usually think of it. Not getting lost in something. Not becoming hypnotized or checked out. Jhāna is more like the absorption of a master musician playing an instrument. The musician is completely present, completely focused, but also completely aware. There is no gap between the player and the playing. No inner commentator narrating the experience. Just pure, unified awareness. Most of us have tasted this state briefly, even if we did not recognize it. Have you ever been so absorbed in a beautiful piece of music that you forgot yourself completely? For a few minutes, there was no you listening to music. There was only the music. And when it ended, you returned to yourself feeling refreshed, somehow cleaner, somehow more alive. That is a taste of Jhāna. Have you ever been so focused on a task that time disappeared? You looked up and hours had passed, but it felt like minutes. That is another taste. The mind had gathered itself into one place. It had become unified. The Buddha discovered that this unified state is not just pleasant. It is not just a nice break from the chaos of daily life. It is the necessary condition for deep seeing. Without it, your discernment is like a flashlight in a thick fog. The light is working. The light is bright. But the fog scatters it in every direction. You cannot see more than a few feet ahead. With Jhāna, the fog lifts. The air becomes clear. And now the same light can illuminate things that were always there but never visible before. You start to see the subtle movements of your own mind. You start to notice how thoughts arise, not as a chaotic storm, but as individual clouds forming and dissolving. You start to see how feelings emerge, how they linger, how they fade. You start to see the spaces between things, the silences between thoughts, the pauses that were always there but never noticed. This is where the real work begins. Not the work of effort, but the work of attention. Not the work of doing, but the work of seeing. I want to tell you another story. This one is about a woman I met years ago who worked as a translator at the United Nations. Her job was to sit in a soundproof booth and listen to speeches in one language while simultaneously speaking them in another. She told me that when she first started, the work was exhausting. Her mind would race. She would anticipate what the speaker was about to say. She would worry about getting the translation right. She would judge her own performance as she was performing. It was like trying to knit while riding a bicycle. But after many years, something shifted. She said there came a moment when she stopped translating and started channeling. The words of the speaker would enter her ears and, without any effort on her part, words in the other language would come out of her mouth. She was not thinking about the words. She was not choosing them. She was simply present, completely present, and the translation happened through her. She described it as a state of profound stillness in the middle of intense activity. Her mind was not blank. It was incredibly alert. But there was no inner commentator. No self watching itself perform. Just pure, focused awareness doing what it does naturally when it is not getting in its own way. That is jhana in action. Not escape from the world, but such complete presence in the world that the usual sense of a separate self doing things falls away. The musician and the music become one. The translator and the translation become one. The meditator and the meditation become one. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds lovely, but how do I get there? How do I move from a mind that is constantly chattering to a mind that can rest in this unified stillness? The Buddha understood this question. He knew that you cannot just decide to be still. You cannot will yourself into jhana any more than you can will yourself into sleep. Trying too hard creates tension, and tension is the opposite of stillness. This is where the third factor enters the path. The Buddha called it right resolve. It is the bridge between your ordinary, scattered mind and the unified stillness of jhana. It is the switch that gets flipped. It is the decision to turn toward a different kind of happiness. Right resolve has 3 dimensions. 3 intentions you cultivate. 3 choices you make, moment by moment, that prepare the mind for the deep stillness that makes deep seeing possible. The first is the resolve to renounce. Not to renounce things in the outer world, but to renounce the inner habit of building worlds around sense experiences. Every time you see something attractive and your mind starts spinning fantasies about having it, you are building a world. Every time you hear something unpleasant and your mind starts spinning stories about how unfair it is, you are building another world. The resolve to renounce is the choice to stop building those worlds. To let the experience be just an experience. To not grab it and weave it into a story. The second is the resolve of non-ill will. This is the choice to drop the storylines of resentment and anger. Every grudge you carry is a world you live in. Every time you rehearse an old hurt, you are building that world again, furnishing it with details, making it more solid. The resolve of non-ill will is the choice to stop building that particular world. Not because the other person deserves your forgiveness, but because you deserve the peace of not living in a world built on anger. The third is the resolve of harmlessness. This goes deeper than just not being angry. It is the intention to act from care rather than carelessness. To notice when your actions might cause suffering, even unintentionally, and to choose a different way. It is the choice to be gentle with yourself and with others, not because you are weak, but because you understand that gentleness creates the conditions for peace. These three resolves are like the three legs of a stool. They prepare the ground. They clear away the major obstacles. They create the conditions where jhana can arise naturally, without force, without struggle. They are the switch that turns on the light, not the light itself. They are the decision to stop stirring the muddy water, so it can finally settle on its own. Now we arrive at a question that might be forming in your mind. If jhana is this unified stillness where insight arises naturally, and if right resolve is the intention that prepares the mind for that stillness, then how does resolve actually lead to stillness? This is where the Buddha's psychology becomes incredibly precise. He noticed something fundamental about how the mind operates. The mind is always seeking happiness. Always. Every thought, every action, every habit is driven by this pursuit. You check your phone hoping for a satisfying notification. You eat hoping for pleasure. You worry about the future hoping that worrying will somehow prepare you and bring safety. Even your most self-destructive patterns are misguided attempts to find happiness or avoid pain. The problem is that most of the happiness the mind chases is unstable. It depends on conditions you cannot control. The pleasure of food depends on having food. The pleasure of praise depends on people praising you. These pleasures are like drinking salt water to quench thirst. The relief is temporary, and the thirst returns stronger. Right resolve is the recognition that there might be another kind of happiness. A happiness that does not depend on conditions. A happiness that arises from within, from the very nature of a still and unified mind. The resolve to renounce sensuality is not about deprivation. It is about redirection. You are not giving up pleasure. You are choosing a deeper, more reliable pleasure. You are trading a handful of coins for a treasure chest. This is psychologically crucial. If you try to renounce through willpower alone, through grim determination, you will fail. The mind will rebel. It will find loopholes. But if you renounce because you have tasted something better, because you have experienced even a moment of jhana's stillness, then renunciation becomes natural. It becomes relief. You are not sacrificing. You are upgrading. I want to tell you a story about this. A woman I know struggled for years with compulsive eating. She tried every diet, every program, every strategy. She would restrict for a while, then binge. Restrict, then binge. The cycle never ended. She thought the problem was food. She thought if she could just find the right rules, the right plan, she would finally be free. Then she started learning to meditate. Not with the goal of fixing her eating, just learning to sit still and watch her breath. At first, it was impossible. Her mind raced. Her body felt restless. But gradually, over months, something shifted. She began to experience moments of genuine stillness. Moments where the craving noise in her head quieted down. One day, sitting with a strong urge to binge, she noticed something she had never noticed before. The urge was not continuous. It came in waves. And between the waves, there were gaps. Tiny spaces where the urge was not present. In one of those gaps, she experienced a moment of peace so profound that it shocked her. The peace was not coming from food. It was coming from the absence of the struggle against food. That moment changed everything. She still experienced urges, but now she knew there was something else available. The peace she had tasted was more satisfying than any binge had ever been. The urges lost their power, not because she fought them, but because she had found something better. That is how right resolve works. It points you toward a different kind of happiness, and Jhāna delivers it. The resolve opens the door. The stillness walks through. Now, how does this resolve actually create the conditions for stillness? The Buddha described the first level of jhana as being secluded from sensuality and secluded from unskillful mental qualities. Secluded does not mean eradicated. It means you have stepped away from them temporarily. You have created a space between yourself and their pull. Right resolve creates that space. When you resolve on renunciation, you are not killing your desires. You are simply choosing not to feed them in this moment. You step back. When you resolve on non-ill will, you are not pretending anger does not exist. You are choosing not to rehearse the story that keeps it alive. You step back. When you resolve on harmlessness, you are choosing, moment by moment, to act with care. You step back from carelessness. Each time you step back, you create a little space. A little gap between stimulus and reaction. A little pause. In that pause, stillness becomes possible. The water stops being stirred. The sediment begins to settle. This is why right resolve is called the bridge. It takes you from automatic reaction to the threshold of unified stillness. It does not create the stillness itself. That happens naturally when you stop creating disturbance. But without the resolve to step back, the disturbance continues endlessly. The mind keeps building worlds. The water keeps churning. The stillness never comes. There is an image for this. Imagine a child spinning top. As long as it spins, you cannot see what it is made of. The motion blurs everything. But when it slows, when it wobbles, when it finally stops, you can see it clearly. The paint. The wood grain. The tiny imperfections. All revealed in stillness. Your mind is that top. Constant spinning. Constant motion. Right resolve is the decision to let it slow down. Not to grab it and force it to stop, which would only make it wobble more, but to simply stop adding energy. Stop whipping it. Let friction do its work. Let stillness arrive on its own. And when it does, when the spinning finally stops, you see what was always there. The nature of your own mind. The patterns you never noticed because they were moving too fast. The peace that was always present but obscured by motion. That is the gift of right resolve. It does not give you peace. It just stops taking it away. Now we come to something that might seem like a contradiction. If right resolve is so important, if it is the bridge that leads to stillness, then what happens when stillness deepens? What happens to resolve itself? The Buddha made a fascinating observation. Right resolve is essential for entering the first level of jhana. It is the intention that turns you away from the worlds of sensuality and ill will and harmfulness. It is the decision to stop stirring the water. But once the water becomes still, once the mind settles into unified awareness, resolve is no longer needed. In fact, it becomes an obstacle. Think about this carefully. Resolve is an act of will. It involves directed thought, inner speech, the subtle conversation you have with yourself. I choose to let go of this thought. I intend to return to the breath. I resolve to be harmless. These are verbal fabrications, sentences in the mind. They are necessary when the mind is scattered, when it keeps wandering into its old habit worlds. They are the gentle hand guiding the elephant back to the post. But when the mind finally settles, when it rests in unified stillness, that inner conversation becomes noise. It becomes another distraction. The mind no longer needs to be told what to do. It knows. It rests. It abides. The elephant stands quietly at the post, no longer straining, no longer needing the mahout's commands. The Buddha described this progression precisely. In the first level of jhana, directed thought and evaluation are still present. You are still gently guiding the mind. Still returning to the object. Still renewing your resolve. But in the second level of jhana, these drop away. The mind is so collected, so unified, that it no longer needs guidance. It rests in what the Buddha called internal assurance. The peace is self-sustaining. This is a profound psychological truth. The very tool that gets you to stillness must eventually be released. The raft that carries you across the river is left behind on the far shore. You do not carry it on your head. The resolve that freed you from distraction becomes distraction itself if you cling to it. I want to tell you a story about this. There is a man I know who spent years learning to play the piano. He practiced scales every day. Hours and hours of scales. He hated scales. They were boring, repetitive, nothing like the beautiful music he wanted to play. But his teacher insisted. Scales build the foundation, the teacher said. They train your fingers. They train your ears. They train your mind. So he persisted. Year after year. And gradually, something shifted. The scales stopped being boring. They became meditative. His fingers knew where to go without being told. His mind could rest in the simple pattern of notes while something else, something deeper, listened. Then one day, he sat down to play a piece by Chopin. A piece he had struggled with for months. And something remarkable happened. He did not play the piece. The piece played itself. His fingers moved. The music flowed. And he was just there, watching, listening, not doing anything at all. All those years of scales had done their work. The foundation was so solid he no longer had to think about it. He could just be present with the music. That is the journey from right resolve to jhana. The resolve is the scale practice. Necessary. Foundational. But eventually, it becomes so natural that you no longer need to resolve. You just rest in the stillness that resolve made possible. Now, here is where discernment enters again. In the deeper levels of jhana, where resolve has fallen away and the mind rests in profound stillness, discernment has its clearest view. The lake is perfectly calm. The light can see all the way to the bottom. And what it sees there changes everything. It sees that even this stillness, even this profound peace, is constructed. It is a state. It arose because of conditions. It will pass when conditions change. It is not the final freedom. It is the clearest possible vantage point from which to see that freedom is something else entirely. This is the ultimate gift of jhana. Not the peace itself, though that peace is real and profound. Not the pleasure, though that pleasure is deeper than any sense pleasure. The ultimate gift is the clarity it provides to see the nature of all constructed things, including itself. From this vantage point, discernment can do its final work. It can see the subtle clinging that remains. The subtle identification with the meditator, the one who achieves stillness. The subtle pride in having attained something. And it can let even that go. The Buddha compared this to using a small fire to light a larger fire, then letting the small fire go out. The small fire was necessary. It served its purpose. But once the larger fire is burning, you do not keep feeding the small one. You let it go. Right resolve is the small fire. Jhāna is the larger fire. And discernment, in the light of that larger fire, sees what must be done next. Sees what still binds you. Sees what still needs release. Now we arrive at the heart of the matter. The place where stillness and seeing finally complete their dance. The place where the path leads beyond itself. The Buddha described 4 levels of jhāna, each more refined than the last. They are not different practices. They are deepening stages of the same unified awareness. Each one peels away another layer of grossness, another level of disturbance, until only the purest, most refined awareness remains. In the first jhāna, the mind is still but still needs gentle guidance. Directed thought and evaluation are present, like a shepherd occasionally guiding a sheep back to the flock. There is rapture and pleasure born from seclusion, the joy of having stepped away from the chaos of normal mind states. In the second jhāna, guidance drops away. The mind is so collected it holds itself in place naturally. The rapture and pleasure deepen, born now from concentration itself. There is a quality of internal assurance, a confidence in the stillness that was not possible before. In the third jhāna, even the intense pleasure begins to feel coarse. The mind lets go of rapture and rests in equanimity. It feels pleasure with the body, but the mind is unmoved, balanced, like a scale perfectly centered. In the fourth jhāna, even that subtle pleasure drops away. The mind is utterly still, utterly pure. The Buddha described it as purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. The observer and the observed have become one. There is only awareness, bright and clear and completely at rest. Each of these stages provides a clearer vantage point for discernment. Each one reveals things that were invisible before, not because they were hidden, but because the mind was too coarse to perceive them. I want to tell you a story that illustrates this. There is a woman I know who restores old paintings. She works in a museum, and her job is to bring centuries-old artwork back to its original condition. She told me that when she first started, she could barely see the differences in color and texture that her teacher pointed out. They all looked the same to her. But over years of practice, her eyes changed. She started seeing layers. She could distinguish the original paint from the varnish that had yellowed over time. She could see where previous restorers had touched up the work with modern paints. She could see the tiny cracks, the subtle shifts in pigment, the ghost of the artist's original brushstroke beneath centuries of grime. She said something I have never forgotten. She said, "I did not learn to see better. I learned to look differently. I stopped looking for the big picture and started looking at what was actually there. The more still I became, the more I could see." That is what jhāna does. It does not give you new eyes. It teaches you to look differently. To look from stillness instead of from motion. To look with the whole mind instead of with the chattering part. Now, what does discernment see when it looks from this profound stillness? It sees the most fundamental truth of all. It sees that everything the mind has ever built, including these beautiful states of stillness, is temporary. Constructed. Conditioned. Not fit to be called self. This is not a philosophical conclusion. It is a direct perception. You do not believe that the fourth jhana is impermanent. You see it arising. You see it passing. You see the conditions that supported it and the conditions that will cause it to end. And in that seeing, something shifts at the deepest level. The mind stops clinging. Not because it tries to stop clinging, but because it sees that there is nothing worth clinging to. Everything it ever held, every identity it ever assumed, every world it ever built, was just a passing show. Even the builder, the one who seemed to be doing all this building, is seen as just another construction. This is what the Buddha called unbinding. Not a place you go. Not a state you achieve. But the natural result of seeing through every state, every place, every achievement. It is what remains when the mind stops adding anything to experience. When it stops building worlds and just rests in what is. The path that got you here, the resolve, the stillness, the seeing, all of it falls away. Not because you reject it, but because its work is done. The raft has reached the far shore. You step onto the land and leave the raft behind. You do not carry it on your head. You do not worship it. You just continue, free of it. This is the secret the Buddha pointed to 25 centuries ago. Not a doctrine to believe. Not a technique to master. But a possibility hidden in plain sight. The possibility of a freedom that does not depend on anything at all. A peace that is not the opposite of disturbance, but something beyond both. It is available to you. Not someday. Not after years of practice. But in moments, even now, when resolve meets stillness and stillness reveals what is true. Those moments are glimpses. They are tastes. And each taste weakens the hold of the old habits. Each glimpse makes the next glimpse more likely. The path is not about getting somewhere else. It is about seeing where you already are. The freedom is not in the future. It is in the letting go, right now, of whatever you are holding. Now we need to address something that might be troubling you. If the goal is this profound freedom, this unbinding that lies beyond all states, then what about ordinary life? What about the demands of work and family and relationships? Is this path only for monks in caves? Is it only for people who can sit in meditation for hours every day? The Buddha anticipated this question. He taught not just monks and nuns, but householders, kings, merchants, farmers. People with responsibilities. People with families. People who could not spend their lives in forest monasteries. And he made it clear that this path is available to everyone, not because everyone can achieve the deepest jhanas, but because the principles apply at every level. The dance of resolve, stillness, and discernment is not something you only do on a cushion. It is something you can bring to every moment of your life. Every interaction. Every decision. Every breath. Let me give you an example from modern life. Consider the experience of waiting in line. You are at the grocery store. The line is long. The person in front of you has a complicated transaction. The cashier is moving slowly. You feel the familiar stirring of irritation. The mind starts building its world. This is taking too long. I do not have time for this. That person is so inconsiderate. The store should open more lanes. Right there, in that ordinary moment, the path is available. The first stirring of irritation is the bait. Right resolve is the choice not to take it. Not to suppress the irritation, but to notice it and choose not to feed it. To step back from building that world. You take a breath. You feel your feet on the floor. You notice the sensation of your hands holding the cart. This gentle redirection of attention is a mini jhāna, a small gathering of the mind into one place. It does not require hours of practice. It requires only this moment's intention. And in that small stillness, discernment can arise. You might see that the irritation is just energy, just a physical sensation in the body. You might see that the story you were building about the inconsiderate person is just a story, not reality. You might even feel a flicker of kindness for the cashier, who is probably tired and doing their best. This whole sequence takes seconds. It does not require special conditions. It requires only the willingness to apply the same principles that govern deep meditation to the small moments of daily life. I want to tell you a story about this. A friend of mine is a paramedic. She works 12-hour shifts responding to emergencies. Her job is chaos by design. Sirens. Urgency. Life and death decisions. She told me that when she first started, the chaos got inside her. She would come home vibrating with adrenaline, unable to sleep, carrying the day's trauma like a weight. Then she learned a simple practice. Between calls, when there was a quiet moment, she would sit in the ambulance and feel her breath. Just one breath. Sometimes just half a breath. She was not trying to achieve deep meditation. She was just gathering herself, even for a moment, in the middle of the chaos. Over time, something shifted. The chaos still happened around her, but it stopped happening inside her. She could be in the middle of a chaotic scene, working with focus and skill, while a part of her remained utterly still. She said it felt like being the calm eye of a hurricane. The storm raged, but the center was untouched. That is the path in daily life. Not escaping from the world, but finding the still center within it. Not waiting for perfect conditions, but using whatever conditions arise as opportunities to practice resolve, to touch stillness, to see clearly. The Buddha called this the direct path. Not because it is short, but because it goes straight to the heart of the matter. Every moment contains the potential for freedom. Every experience can be a teacher. Every irritation can be a reminder to step back. Every pleasure can be a reminder not to cling. This is why right resolve is so important. It is the switch you can flip at any moment. The intention that turns an ordinary moment into a moment of practice. The choice to stop building worlds and start seeing clearly. You do not need to wait until you have hours of free time. You do not need to wait until life settles down. Life will never settle down completely. There will always be another demand, another problem, another distraction. The path is not about finding a time when there are none. The path is about learning to be free in the middle of them. I want to share another story, this one about a schoolteacher I know. She works with children who have experienced trauma. These children come to her classroom carrying wounds that most of us cannot imagine. They act out. They shut down. They push her away precisely when they need her most. She told me that her training taught her techniques, strategies, interventions. But in the moment, with a child screaming or crying or hiding under a desk, none of that training mattered. She was just reacting, just surviving, just trying to get through the day. Then she started bringing her meditation practice into the classroom. Not sitting on a cushion, but the same principles applied in real time. When a child would trigger her frustration, she learned to notice the trigger as it happened. Right resolve in action. Not feeding the frustration. Not building the story about how difficult this child is. Just noticing and stepping back. In that small pause, stillness could arise. Not deep jhāna, but a moment of collectedness. Enough space to breathe. Enough space to choose a response instead of reacting. And from that small stillness, discernment could see. She might see that the child's behavior was not about her at all. It was about pain the child carried. She might see that what the child needed most in that moment was not a technique, but simply presence. Someone calm. Someone steady. Someone not adding more chaos to the chaos they already felt. She said this changed everything. Not because the children changed, though some did. Because she changed. She stopped being a victim of the classroom chaos and started being a source of stability within it. The same external circumstances, but a completely different internal experience. That is the promise of this path. Not that life will stop being difficult, but that you will stop being defeated by difficulty. Not that irritation will never arise, but that you will no longer be compelled to build worlds around it. Not that you will achieve perfect stillness, but that you will learn to touch stillness even in motion. The secret the Buddha pointed to is not hidden in ancient texts. It is hidden in plain sight, in every moment of your life. The choice to step back. The willingness to be still. The courage to see clearly. These are always available. They are the path itself. Now we come to something delicate. Something that might challenge the way you think about progress on this path. We have spoken about right resolve, the intention that turns you toward a different kind of happiness. We have spoken about jhāna, the unified stillness that creates the conditions for deep seeing. We have spoken about discernment, the light that reveals what was always there but never visible. And we have spoken about bringing these principles into daily life, into the ordinary moments of waiting in line and responding to children and working in chaos. But there is a danger here. A subtle trap that the mind sets for itself. The trap of thinking that this is all about becoming something. About achieving something. About getting somewhere. The mind loves progress. It loves goals. It loves the feeling of moving forward, of improving, of getting better. And this path offers plenty of opportunities for that kind of thinking. You can think about becoming more resolved, more still, more discerning. You can measure your progress. You can compare yourself to where you were last month, last year. You can feel good about how far you have come. All of that is the mind building another world. A world called my spiritual progress. A world called the meditator who is getting better. And as long as you are living in that world, you are missing the point entirely. The Buddha was very clear about this. The path is not about becoming anything. It is about unbecoming. It is about letting go of everything you have become. Every identity. Every achievement. Every version of yourself that you have constructed. Even the identity of a good meditator. Even the identity of someone who has attained jhana. Even the identity of someone who is enlightened. All of these are worlds the mind builds. And the path leads beyond every world, including the worlds it built itself. I want to tell you a story about this. There is a man I know who spent 20 years in a Zen monastery. 20 years of sitting. 20 years of bowing. 20 years of being a monk. He was respected. He was advanced. He had achieved states of concentration that most people cannot imagine. Then he left. He came back to ordinary life. He got a job. He got married. He had children. People who knew him from his monastery days were confused. Some were disappointed. They thought he had given up. They thought he had failed. I asked him about this once. I asked him if leaving meant he had lost something. He laughed and said something I have never forgotten. He said, "In the monastery, I spent 20 years building a very beautiful house. A house of stillness. A house of peace. A house of profound states. It was the most beautiful house I had ever lived in. But one day, I realized that I was still living in a house. I was still inside something. And the path is not about building better houses. It is about being willing to live without any house at all." He said that leaving was not a loss. It was the final letting go. The final renunciation. Not renouncing sensuality or ill will or harmfulness. He had done that long ago. This was renouncing the spiritual identity itself. Renouncing the meditator. Renouncing the achiever. Renouncing the one who had attained. And in that renunciation, he found something that had been there all along. Something that was not a state, not an achievement, not a house. Just freedom. Just presence. Just this. This is the paradox at the heart of the path. Everything we have discussed, the resolve, the stillness, the discernment, all of it is necessary. All of it is the path. But none of it is the goal. The goal is what remains when even the path is let go. The Buddha used the image of a raft. You build a raft to cross a dangerous river. You gather logs. You bind them together. You paddle across. The raft saves your life. It is essential. But when you reach the other shore, you do not pick up the raft and carry it on your head. You leave it behind. It has served its purpose. The path is the raft. Right resolve is a log. Jhāna is a log. Discernment is a log. You bind them together with mindfulness and effort, and they carry you across the river of suffering. But the far shore is not more raft. The far shore is land. Solid ground. You do not need the raft anymore. The danger is falling in love with the raft. Spending your life polishing it, admiring it, comparing your raft to other people's rafts. The danger is mistaking the raft for the shore. This is why the Buddha emphasized that even the most refined states of jhana are to be seen clearly, understood, and eventually let go. Not rejected, but seen for what they are. Constructed. conditioned, temporary, not fit to be called self. And in that seeing, in that final letting go, something opens. Something that was always there but never noticed because you were too busy building. Too busy achieving. Too busy becoming. The secret the Buddha pointed to is not something you get. It is something you uncover. Not something you add, but something you subtract. Not something you become, but something you always were, hidden behind all the becoming. We have traveled far together in this teaching. From the initial recognition that stillness and seeing depend on each other, through the cultivation of right resolve, into the depths of jhāna, through the application of these principles in daily life, and finally to the letting go of even the path itself. Now we arrive at the place where all of this comes home. Where the teaching stops being about the Buddha and starts being about you. Because ultimately, this is not about ancient history. It is not about a man who lived 25 centuries ago in India. It is not about monks in forests or texts in dead languages. It is about the mind that is listening to these words right now. It is about the awareness that is present in this very moment, reading these sentences, noticing the spaces between them, feeling the weight of your body, hearing the sounds in your environment. The Buddha often said that he only pointed the way. He could not walk the path for anyone. He could describe the territory with precision and compassion, but each person had to make the journey themselves. This is not because he was withholding something or being deliberately difficult. It is because the path is internal. It is made of your own intentions, your own attention, your own awareness. No one else can resolve for you. No one else can be still for you. No one else can see for you. These are not things that can be given or transferred. They can only be cultivated, moment by moment, by you. This is both the challenge and the beauty of the path. It is utterly personal, utterly intimate, and utterly possible. You do not need anyone's permission. You do not need special credentials. You do not need to wait for the stars to align. The path is available in this breath, in this moment, regardless of where you are or what you have done or how far you think you have to go. I want to tell you one final story. It is about a woman who came to a teacher with a question that many of us carry. She had been practicing for years. She had sat through countless hours of meditation. She had studied the teachings extensively. She had tried with genuine sincerity to be kind, to be harmless, to be present, to let go. But she still suffered. She still got angry. She still got afraid. She still got caught in the same old patterns. She came to the teacher feeling like a failure, feeling like she must be doing something fundamentally wrong. She said, "I have been practicing for years. I have done everything the teachings suggest. But I still suffer. I still get angry. I still get afraid. I still get caught. What am I doing wrong?" The teacher looked at her for a long time with great kindness. Then he said, "You are trying to get somewhere. You are measuring yourself against some idea of where you should be. You are comparing this moment to some imagined future moment when you will finally have it all figured out. And that comparing, that measuring, that striving, that is the suffering. That is what keeps you trapped. The anger is not the problem. The fear is not the problem. The problem is the layer on top of them, the layer that says this should not be happening, that I should be further along, that I should be different than I am. She said, but how do I stop comparing? How do I stop striving? It feels so automatic. It feels like my mind does it before I even notice. The teacher said, by seeing that you are already here. Right here. In this moment. With this breath. With this body. With this mind, just as it is, with all its anger and all its fear and all its old patterns. The freedom you are seeking is not in some future moment when you finally get it right. It is in this moment, when you stop demanding that it be different. It is in the gap between the anger and your reaction to the anger. It is in the space between the fear and the story you build around the fear. She said, but this moment has suffering in it. This moment has anger and fear. How can freedom be found in something that contains suffering? The teacher smiled and said, of course this moment has suffering. That is not the problem. The problem is when you add the second arrow, the arrow of resistance, the arrow of wanting it to be otherwise. When you stop demanding that this moment not have anger and fear, when you stop fighting what is already here, something shifts. The anger is still present, but you are not adding the layer of resistance. The fear is still there, but you are not building a world around it. And in that non-resistance, in that non-building, there is a peace that the anger cannot touch and the fear cannot reach. It was always there, underneath. You just could not feel it because you were so busy fighting. That peace is what the Buddha called unbinding. Not the absence of experience, but the absence of clinging to experience. Not the end of thoughts and feelings, but the end of being owned by them. Not the destruction of the self, but the seeing through the illusion that there ever was a self to begin with. This is the invitation that stands before you now. Not to become someone else. Not to achieve some future state of perfection. Not to eliminate every uncomfortable feeling. But to see what is already here, in this very moment, when you stop building worlds and just rest in awareness. Right now, as you listen to these words, there is awareness present. You do not have to create it. You do not have to achieve it. You do not have to earn it. It is already here. It is what is listening. It is what is noticing the pauses between words. It is what is aware of the temperature of the air on your skin, the weight of your body against whatever is supporting it, the thoughts that pass through like clouds across an open sky. That awareness is already free. It is already still. It is already seeing. It has never been bound. It has never been limited. It has never been damaged by anything you have thought or done or experienced. The only thing that obscures it is the mind's habit of building worlds and then living inside them, mistaking the temporary constructions for reality itself. The only thing that stands between you and this freedom is the next thought, the next story, the next becoming. Right resolve is the choice to stop building, even for a moment. Jhāna is the stillness that reveals what is always there beneath the constructions. Discernment is the seeing that recognizes this awareness as your true home, the one you never actually left. And now, all of that teaching, all of those words, all of those stories, all of those concepts, point to this moment. This breath. This listening. This presence. This awareness that is reading these words and knowing that it is reading them. You do not need to wait. You do not need to prepare. You do not need to be better than you are right now. You do not need to have your act together. You do not need to be free of anger or fear or craving. The path is not about becoming worthy of freedom. It is about recognizing that you have always been free, and that the only thing binding you is the belief that you are not, the habit of looking away from what is already here towards some imagined future when it will finally be okay. So here it is. The secret the Buddha pointed to 25 centuries ago, hidden in plain sight, available in this very moment, in this very breath. The choice to step back from the next world the mind tries to build. The willingness to be still, even for an instant. The courage to see clearly what is actually here, not what you wish were here or fear might be here. And the recognition that what you have been seeking everywhere else is what is doing the seeking. May you find this freedom. May you rest in this awareness. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free. Not someday. Not when you finally get it right. But now, in this moment, just as you are. Thank you for spending this time at Monk's Temple. The path is always here, waiting for you to return. And you are always welcome.